Hello and welcome back to this episode of Five Alarm Task Force. If you've been listening to the audio, if you're watching the video, welcome. We're glad to have you with us. I am Steve Green, your host, and it is my pleasure today to welcome back probably one of the most well-experienced chiefs that I've had the honor and pleasure to meet through the podcast and interview. And this is retired Chief Marc Bashoor. He since 2018, he has been the executive editor of firerescue1.com. And if you're not getting those daily news blasts, get over to that website and sign up for them. Because while you might have others, and I do, I also find that the Fire Rescue One news blast has some articles and key topics that just aren't necessarily covered by some of the other news blasts. So I really enjoy getting it every day, plus the weekend update, which is great. Also, he recently retired after 3 years as a public safety director with Highland County, Florida. Now, let me just tell you a little bit more because I don't think he has many achievements to his name as I look through this resume. He served in 2015, 2016 as the chairman of the Metro Washington Council of Governments Fire Chiefs Committee. We must actually lead off by saying that he actually did a tremendous amount of work from a basic firefighter through deputy fire chief at the Prince George's County Fire and EMS Department. And then you also became the chief of the department, correct?
Yeah, I was chief.
Right. Prince George's County from 2010 through March of 2017. And he's a member of the National Capital Region Emergency Planning Council, member of the Maryland Metro Chiefs, as well as the Maryland Fire Chiefs, member of the NFPA, serving on the 2015 Fire Needs Assessment Committee. 2015 presented and consulted on behalf of NFPA in Sao Paulo, Brazil, and Beijing, China. Member of the IAFC, Eastern Division, and Metro Chief Section, served on the IAFC Metro Affordable Care Act Task Force. Regular contributor to Firehouse Magazine and firehouse.com under the column header Chief's Concerns. 35 years emergency service with Prince George Fire Department. He was the chief 2010 to March 2017. Emergency Management, Homeland Security, 911 Director in Mineral County, West Virginia. 2006-2010, back with PGFD, 1981-2005. TEEX and NERTC 2004 until the grants dried up, and Larissa, West Virginia instructor, NIMS IMT certified. Presenter at various conferences and classes on topics of leadership, motivation, ACA, and lessons learned. Awarded the Prince George Fire Department Silver Medal of Valor in 2004. He was on to receive the 2017 Greater Prince George's Business Roundtable Life Achievement Award, the 2016 Capital Cadillac Standard of Living Award for Community Leadership, the 2015 Metropolitan Washington Council of Governments Kirby Award for Collaborative Leadership, and the 2014 City of Bowie Chamber of Commerce Leadership Award, and so much more. And Chief, it is just a thrill and an honor to have you back again.
Thanks, Steve. I appreciate you taking the time.
Well, it's my honor and our privilege to be here with you and to have you with us again. You always are very insightful into the fire service. And what I like when I read some of your articles, and by the way, thank you for that link to the article on Hurricane Ian on Florida West Coast. I'm glad that I've heard back from some of our brothers there that made it okay and they were safe, and that was the most important thing to me. I wanted to drive over the day after the storm, but my drill sergeant, otherwise that I've been married to for 48 years, said absolutely not. You don't even know if you can get across Alligator Alley yet. But I said, I got to do something to help. These aren't just strangers now. These are people that I know. Yeah. And Scott Blanchard in Venice and Joe DeVito in Fort Myers Beach Fire District and several others there at Bonita Springs. So I'm just glad that for the most part, they all are safe and managed to come through okay. But today we're going to talk about, in our first segment here with the chief, we're going to talk about two major reports that have come out, and the chief has a very insightful eye to these. So I'm going to turn it over to him, and we're going to discuss these two reports in the first segment. Then the second segment, he has a little special topic he's going to bring up. So, Chief, let's talk about this first one. You want to address the report out of California you mentioned?
Yeah, so, unless you've been hiding under a rock, which I know some people may have been, you've likely seen the two recent reports that have come out. One as a physical report out of Baltimore just in the last week or so, and then a couple weeks back, the video from the Boyd Street fire.
Right.
So Boyd Street was in Los Angeles. That was the warehouse in the warehouse district that had a lot of butane and other products in a warehouse that the fire department wasn't aware about. All kinds of things that had been done to subdivide the occupancy and overload the environment beyond what any sprinklers or any what would have been traditional fire protection measures could control. Ultimately, the building was storing things it wasn't designed for, and it was they were trying to do things with the building it wasn't designed for, and this is what we end up having. So the National Fallen Firefighters Foundation did actually a great video that was very frank. That the Los Angeles Fire Department, I commend them, and I commend Baltimore for releasing their report. Baltimore's being the South Stricker Street, that just came out, but those two incidents both have some commonalities, and it's not that they're both big cities or mid-sized cities or whatever. It's got nothing to do with that. The fires could happen wherever, right? I mean, it could be in Idaho, it could be in Baltimore, it could be, wherever. What they share, what the reports share, and again, Boyd Street's just a video as far as what's out there, but what they both share is some cultural problems, what I'll call problems. Again, I want to reiterate, though, I commend both departments for going on record with their stories. Too many times we've seen reports get buried and not released publicly. And ultimately, you said in the beginning, one of the things that I do classes on is lessons learned. And we can't learn from these incidents if we don't know about them. And if they get buried on a shelf somewhere or buried in a legal system somewhere, we're never going to learn from them. We might find out years later when something comes out in a court case, and we have to be sensitive to the legalities of all of that. So I commend both departments for going on record and releasing the information in the interest of all of us learning. So as we look at both of them, in the Boyd Street case, they talk about 42 seconds. There was 42 seconds that they had to get off the roof and off the ladder as they were enveloped in fire. When you really distill it down, I've got it down to about 12 seconds in the video, where the crew of 3 or 4 that were on the ladder at that point were 100% enveloped in fire. And we're not just talking about a lazy little fire. We're talking butane-fueled explosion. And there was 12 seconds where you couldn't see them. It's all captured on helmet cam. It's all in the video. You go to firehero.org and search the Boyd Street report or Boyd Street video, and you'll be able to find it if you haven't. And maybe if you're able to put it up in the show notes of the YouTube here, that'd be great to have that there for viewers to look at. But there was 12 seconds they were completely enveloped in fire. And the one thing that stuck out to me was while every one of them had some injury, every one of them survived. They only survived because of the use of their full protective ensemble. They were completely dressed. They were, they were completely enveloped. Way, way, way too many times we see these incidents come out. And we had one in Prince George's County where 2 firefighters were caught in what was essentially a flashover. It was a flow path change, our 57th Avenue call. 2 firefighters were trapped in that. And it went from a very survivable 250 degrees to a very unsurvivable 800 degrees with the flip of a switch. one firefighter in that particular case was wearing rescue gloves. And that was where the vast majority of the burns that he received were the disfigurement of his hands because he wasn't wearing proper PPE. He could have survived the rest of it without significant injury if he was wearing proper PPE. So Boyd Street, they were wearing proper PPE. But there are some cultural things as you listen to the audio and you watch the video. And, not to, again, lessons learned, right? That's what we're here to talk about. One of the things is as you listen to the firefighters talk, they're up on the roof. Some of them have on SCBA, some of them don't. They're cutting a hole in the roof. There's smoke. Now there's fire coming from the rear. There's smoke coming out of their hole. And a couple of them talked about, we weren't wearing our SCBA at the time because that's just not what we do. And that's a lesson learned right there. We need to talk about the culture of people not wearing their SCBA when they're in an environment that's already proven to be IDLH, immediately dangerous to life and health. If it's a smoky environment, it's already an IDLH atmosphere. But it's not what we do, right? It's that culture. And again, not a shot at them. It is or at the chief or anybody else. Now it's a new chief in there now, but and not because of this incident, but it's a new chief in there. And we have got to begin to turn the tide of that culture. And I think the National Fallen Firefighter Foundation and a bunch of others that are working on the cancer programs have been trying to drive that home, to wear the SCBA longer. But we've still got a lot of people who go, it's just not what we do. Fires are different here. We don't do it that way here. I hear that so many times, and I just, I kind of just sit and listen to them, and then we have a very frank conversation. And at the end of the day, I think most people get it, but there are still a lot of bravado out there, especially in our larger departments, where it doesn't happen here. Well, I could do a 4-hour class on everywhere it happens, and it does happen there. It happens here. It happens next door. You name it, it's going to happen. It's a matter of how you deal with the culture. The other thing that you really see out of Boyd Street, and you just have to watch, and this is a pet peeve of mine, consistently throughout the video, you'll see some people completely properly attired in their SCBA and everything else, gloves and whatnot. And then you'll see others with waist straps hanging down. They'll slap the cylinder on their back and they'll get off the fire truck and they'll go about their business. And their attitude, if you will, because I'll call it an attitude, is, I don't need that stupid strap. So if you listen to the firefighter, and I don't think his rank was firefighter, at the moment I can't remember his name, but if you listen to the firefighter that talks about coming down the ladder, he's the one they interviewed the most in the Boyd Street video, and he talks about how he got to a point where he felt like someone was on top of him, and he got stuck, and he couldn't move, and he was completely enveloped in fire. And what it wasn't his waist strap, but it could have been. It was his axe. It was his tool that he had, and his tool got wedged in the ladder as he's trying to come down, and he said he felt he just physically couldn't go anywhere because of the way the tool was attached to him and the way it was wedged, and felt like someone was on top of him. That's exactly how one of those folks is going to feel when their strap gets hung up in one of those rungs. When their strap gets hung up in between one of the structural members of something in a wire and they can't move, they're going to feel like someone's on top of them because they didn't buckle their strap. And then when they go down and the rest of the firefighters come and try to pull them out, they're going to try, if they don't have a rescue strap on their, on their coat, the next thing we try is to pull SCBA harness. Well, if it's not strapped around your waist, they're going to pull it right off you because it's not strapped around your waist. So again, it goes back to culture, and it's just it's hard to believe, frankly, in the large city, but it goes back to it's going to happen wherever. It's hard to believe that we're still talking about this. We're still talking about SCBA. We're still talking about waist straps. And again, I appreciate them sharing it so that we can all learn from it.
I want to bring something up. It's a matter of having vision and leadership. And that was, I had probably only been a volunteer for about 2 months when I ran my first fire call with my buddy who I met at the firehouse that night that we were first elected to become members, and he's still my best friend 47 years later. But we went on.
Telling your age now, Steve.
Oh yeah, I'm over 70, and that's where it is, and I'm glad I made it where I am.
Good
man. And we went on a auto fire call at an apartment complex, and we had at that point in time, nothing about SCBA. We trained on them, but for a car fire, nobody said anything. So Rich and I are knocking down the fire, and we got the engine compartment pretty well knocked down. We're working towards this in the seats, and the wind turned just in a moment and pushed the black smoke right back on both of us. And we had to shut down the hose, and we were coughing and everything cough. So the chief ran over and said, you boys okay? And we said, yeah. He says, all right, put the hose down. We're going to go get your SCBAs. And he goes, and you tell anybody else if they don't hear it. From this point on, every car fire, we're going to be wearing our air tanks. That's the SOP, Steve, right now for you and Richard, and you guys spread the word, and I'm going to bring it up at the next business meeting. And so ever after that, we always, any kind of a fire, other than an open field fire, we were wearing self-contained breathing apparatus.
Yeah, and in the Boyd Street case, they had it on their back, right? They were wearing the cylinder, but they didn't wear the mask when they were up there. And he said, you listen to a couple of them talk about it. They said that it's just not what we do. Fortunately, before they started to come down the ladder, they had the inkling that there was a problem, and they all masked up. They got to the point where it was too much, and they masked up. And it's a good thing they masked up, because they weren't when they went up there.
Right.
They went up under smoke conditions. It wasn't much, but they went up under smoke conditions. They started cutting holes. Now the front door, or the front, what was roll up is cut, and the back is open and fire's coming out of it. Well, now we have an open vent, right, with a hole in the roof that they've cut. So we've created the updraft that it needed, and it's coming right up at the roof. And they got to the point where, okay, we got to put this on. Well, it's a good thing they did, because then they needed to abandon the roof. I strongly encourage everybody to listen to that video. It's about an hour long, a little over an hour long. It's well worth the hour to listen. And don't look at it from a critical perspective. Look at it from a learning perspective.
Right.
Learn from what they tell you that they wish they did differently, and learn from the things you see. I mean, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to look at those straps hanging down and realize that, that's just not the right way you're supposed to wear them. We had a off topic, but same concept. We had a call this morning in my general neighborhood down the road here. A gentleman died in a car wreck. He hit a cow. Well, you don't normally die on these roads from hitting a cow. Well, he hit the cow. He was at a high speed. His car flipped, and it threw him out of the car. Well, if he was wearing that strap called a seatbelt, then unfortunately, he's dead. And that's exactly what I'm trying to drive home with the straps on the cylinder. Is you may not take it real serious, and it's not a law per se, but the straps make a difference. And it's not just about the rescue. It also takes the weight off of your back and put it on the hips. It's all part of the ensemble and what's designed to do. So I just encourage people to look at that. But then also, as they're watching that video, take a critical eye to the discussion about the occupancy, and think about your first dues, and think about all of the different buildings and environments that are out there that you don't know what's in there. And some people will say, well, we have a pre-planned program to cover that. Okay, well, you would think Los Angeles would be able to tell us that a pre-planned program, and they do, but there's almost no way that any bigger department is going to be able to put eyes on every occupancy all the time, because it may have been pre-planned as X. Well, since you pre-planned it, now they've moved partition walls, and they put holes in walls, and in this case, they put all the materials up to the front of one of the doors. So they had dual entrances, two different addresses that were never designed to operate as one. Well, they cut a hole in between the two of them, And now they moved all of the stock up to the front of this one. So as you're trying to open the doors, the roll-up doors on this one, you open it up and it's nothing but stock with this little alley to go in between them, where there's a door over here. Well, it was never designed for that. And as you get into that and try to advance hose lines and do the things you need to do, you're going to get, and they talk about it. They talk about how that section they tried to go through collapsed on them, and how the line got hung up and the ladder got hung up. And without getting out into those on a regular basis and there's just too much out there. So the officers really need to be aware of their first due. The chiefs need to think about what their pre-planned program is. And I'm not suggesting that Los Angeles is deficient in any way. I'm suggesting that you don't know what you don't know. And right. If you don't get out there and look, you'll never know anything.
On our last, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Go ahead, finish up.
No, you're good.
On our last episode, we had Captain E.J. Henninger from a relatively rural department outside the city of Philadelphia. And he happens to be, besides being a volunteer captain, he happens to be for over 20 years a fire protection systems design engineer. And so on this podcast a couple of weeks ago, we were talking about just that we had a webinar in the summer on big box stores. As you know, you're talking about California. Well, we know California had two major big boxes, actually three, because there were two Walmarts. No, one in California, one in Texas, and then they had the Home Depot in California. And we talked about the fact that how we said we only can design by what we're given in the initial plans.
Sure.
But when they start, they change the fire load internally, but we don't know about that because the store's been open for 2 years already, whatever the case is. And they're changing fire loads, changing locations, and we set it up for the way it was originally drawn out and presented to us. You're going to and as we saw in those three big box stores, they were all sprinklered, but not one of them was able to be saved. All three buildings were lost.
And it's actually a lot more than three. Illinois had them, North Carolina had them. It's been Amazon, it's been Walmart. I mean, they've had them, and we actually have a article coming out from Steve Lorry, the fire chief in Hagerstown, Maryland. They had one not as catastrophic as those, and he talks about all of these 1.2 million square foot warehouses, and exactly some of the things he's talking about is, it's designed for X and we end up with Y. We won't know any of it unless we get out there and look at it. So that article is coming out soon, so it's kind of fortuitous we're talking about it, and encourage people to look at that too. Same thing, learn from all of these lessons. Now it's nothing but for the training of those firefighters that they walked away. The training that they had did allow them to walk away. The culture that they were in, though, almost killed them. Does it make sense?
Yes, very much so.
And the culture that they were in almost killed them, but the training they had allowed them to walk away. So I credit them with they're a hell of a firefighting force. There's no debate whatsoever. But there's a culture that's there, and it's not just there. There are departments all across the country that, and I was in Prince George's County. We had lots of cultural issues that, so it's not the pot calling the kettle black. I'll call my pot black just like anybody else's pot black. At the end of the day, it is a cultural issue that we as firefighters need to address.
And I think that's the most important thing, is that we make, it's a long time phrase, but we make mistakes by either omission or commission.
Mm-hmm.
When I don't know if you remember the old app, before Instagram really blew up, there was a thing called Periscope, and they would drop all these little videos.
Yeah.
And my blood would boil every time I would see, especially a chief officer in the hot zone with his bunker coat open. You could see that his suspenders from his bunker pants hanging down to the sides, and they're walking in the hot zone. I mean, not even in the warm zone, the hot zone. I had another one with a firefighter at the front door, flames come out the front door, bending down to put on his hood and his helmet and his mask. Then, so you're doing it right in front of the door. That door could blow open on you in a second. You don't have to worry about your mask anymore.
Yeah, and it's a perfect transition to the second incident. The second incident in South Stricker Street in Baltimore. The report just came out. Chief Niles Ford, who was a friend of mine, he resigned after the report came out. He'd been chief for, I believe, 8 years.
Right.
Like any Metro chief, you had issues, had concerns. They had engines down and trucks down and staffing was down and EMS. Every one of the Metro departments has the same issues. So is he any different? No. Um, the difference is in how people handle it, how the culture deals with it, the politics of it, all of those things. But in that particular report, it's stunning the number of things. And I'm only through page about 120 out of 300 and some pages. Now, a lot of them are pages of CAD printouts and different things. So, it's not as difficult as it sounds to get through it, but I've still got a ways to get totally through it. But the meat and potatoes of it is that culture, I'll say this carefully, culture killed 3 firefighters. You can look at the pictures and make your own judgments, and there will be people who scoff at the idea that we should or shouldn't have gone in to that building. But if you look at the pictures, before that first crew went in the front door, there was fire coming out of all 3 floors, floor to ceiling, coming out of all 3 floors of the building. There was nothing survivable in that space. Well, Chief, you couldn't see the rear. Okay, well, I got a picture from the rear too. There was nothing survivable in that space. The unit officer has to make a decision there. I won't second guess her decision because she's no longer with us to be able to tell her why she did what she did. I can only second guess it based on the picture. So back up from that picture. There's another picture of, and you talked about a firefighter at the front door putting a mask on. It's another picture of a firefighter at the front door, which was boarded up. Okay, so this was before the board was taken off that front door. The firefighter had no SCBA on, was at the front door. Now there's fire coming out at that point. There's fire coming out of the second, third floors directly above them. I mean, what, 6 feet
Right.
above them? Fire blowing out of those 2 windows, both on the second floor and on the third floor. And on the first floor, you could see the glow. He's cutting with I forget which tool it is he's using, but he's cutting with a tool, no SCBA. Same thing. As soon as you get through that hole, what do you create? You create a flow path. You create a situation that it's got the oxygen it needs now, and whoosh. That particular, just so many things on this incident. That particular firefighter was a lieutenant. He was the lieutenant from the shift prior that had been relieved, but jumped on the fire truck and was not included in the staffing or accountability. So, I mean, as you begin to wrap your hand around that incident, so many of the things that, would I have done the same thing, jumping on the fire truck? Probably. If I had just gotten relieved and they put that out, and one of the initial reports said children trapped, and the second report said it was next door there was children, yeah, I probably would have done the same thing. Would I have had my SCBA on? Absolutely, I would have had my SCBA on. Whether cutting the front door or not, they needed to get in, so I get that. That's not a question. But the not in the accountability. They weren't the first due engine; they were the second due, but they were the first arriving, and it wasn't articulated right. I mean, you read through the report, and you can just see the snowball of the culture. And what I mean by that is, there's a process for, if you're going to be first arriving and you weren't first due, but you're going to be first arriving, there's a process to announce that and to say, I'm assuming first due responsibilities, and that wasn't done. It's all part of the culture. Where they position, where the battalion chief position, the things that you hear them talk about in the report that are documented in this report are all part of a culture that takes big fires for granted. We're a big department. We can do this. We don't need to worry about the little stuff. Incident command. Incident command was conducted for the first, I'm going to say half hour. I've got to go back and look at the numbers, but at least for the first half hour, there was no chart, there was no computer. Everything was in the guy's head. Now, I've heard many a fire chief say, I don't need a stinking pad. I don't need a piece of paper. I don't need a computer. I can run this fire. And you know what? On your mom and pop, I'll give you that. I'm going to require you as a chief, I'm going to require you to use the form, whether it's the paper or the computer, I don't care. I'm going to require you to use a form for a couple of reasons. One's legal reasons, because it's recorded of what you're doing. And the other is because as things escalate, the physiology of your brain doesn't remember things the same way at the same speed. And you begin to lose things. You begin to lose not only the documentation of what you did, but you begin to lose the relationship of the things that are happening because you don't have it down in front of you. You're trying to remember it all. And as they start spinning, and in this case, they spun like this to a collapse within 5 minutes. They arrived within 2 minutes of the 911 call. Within 3 minutes later, it was collapsing. So within 5 minutes, this thing is collapsing around them. And for half an hour, there was nothing on a command and control, whether a chart or a computer. There was no accountability done. It was alarming, the things that I know the Baltimore City Fire Department does. I know they have command charts in the computers that they can use. I know that they have an accountability system and that they've used it before. But this was 6 o'clock in the morning, shift change time, basically, just before 6. And it sounds like to me there was a lackadaisical approach to this is just another fire. And yeah, it may look like it's vacant, but we got a report of kids trapped. They didn't switch any units off of the main radio channel. Everything on the incident stayed on that radio channel. One of the things that the report talks about, they, because the digital systems, they can monitor those systems 185 times during the incident. 185 times somebody tried to talk on the radio but couldn't because there was too much traffic. So we know that the system was overloaded, that they needed to be switched. They know they need to do it. They have a process for doing it. Move staging over to here, if it's water supply, EMS task force, all these different places that you have to put people. They didn't do it. The 2 of the firefighters that were killed didn't have their portable radios with them. They left them on the fire truck. They know that. They know they need to take it with them. It goes back to the culture. It's just another fire, not a big deal. So both of those incidents, and there's a lot more on South Stricker Street. I encourage people, same thing, if you can put in your show notes, if you can put a link to that report, we'll make sure we get it to you. If nothing else, in memory of the 3 firefighters that died, and it's firefighter Kenneth, and I may pronounce the last name wrong, and I apologize if I am, but firefighter Kenneth Locoyo, acting Lieutenant Kelsey Sadler, and Lieutenant Buttram. And those 3, so firefighter John McMaster, he was also trapped, but he was rescued within 14 minutes. And he lived another day. Firefighter Locoyo took 90 minutes to get to him. Acting Lieutenant Sadler, it took 130 minutes to get to her. Lieutenant Buttram took 10 hours and 8 minutes to get to him. So the question comes down to, as people look at it, and the question that we will battle in these classes, but I challenge anybody to look at that first picture. And it's a stunning, difficult to look at picture because it's the 3 of them in the picture. It's their last picture of them alive.
Right.
Getting ready to go in the front door with a hose line with fire blowing out of all 3 floors. And you have to ask yourself why.
Right.
And so now let's flip gears for just a second. Okay. The answer to that I always hear is because you never know when someone's going to be inside there. Okay. So I buy that. You're right. You never know when someone's going to be in there, but you also have to know when something's survivable and when it's not. They train us to look at that and determine that. And while I'm only looking at the one side when I look at that picture, when fire is blowing out of all windows on all floors, there's nothing survivable about that. Could there be a room that's closed off in somewhere in the building? Absolutely. But there's still an issue of that has to be established of, can you physically survive it going in? And we've already answered that. Could you hit it from the outside real quick with the master stream? You got to have the supply to do that. Could you hit it real quick and then go in to do what you need to do, which is what I would certainly be advocating for here. And then in this case, what do we know about the building? So I'll tell you the things they should have known. One, it had had a fire before, so that should have known. Okay, should those individuals have known it? I don't know, but that was knowledge to the department. And number two, it was built in the late 1800s. This was built in the late 1800s. So what does that tell us about the construction? Probably some heavy timber, probably just timber that's notched into the bricks, which is exactly what it was. Something that had already had a fire, built in the 1800s, suspect to collapse real quick. And that's exactly what happened. So again, fast forward back to that discussion of there's it's not vacant until we say it's vacant. Okay, that's the thing I hear. It's not vacant until we say it's vacant. Just this morning, city of Baltimore, overnight, they had a fire. Actually, they had a fire, I don't know exactly what day, but they had a fire in an apartment building. And they went on the scene and determined that it was a vacant and unstable building, and they hit it from the outside. They did all their firefighting from the outside. And a family member showed up later, meaning a day later, and wanted to know why the fire department didn't find Uncle Johnny, I don't know the real name, who was dead inside the apartment. And in that particular case, it appears it's too fresh to overanalyze it, but it certainly appears that they did an exterior attack because they deemed the building to be vacant and unsafe, and someone was dead inside. Now, whether they died from the fire or they were dead already, I don't know. And until an autopsy is done, we'll never know that. But it's the tale of two cities in one city.
Yeah.
So did they do a 360 from the South Stricker Street fire and go, you know what? If it looks like it's vacant, we're just not going in. Did they take the easy way out because it looked like it was a vacant and it's just, again, back to culture? I don't know. I do know that the city established a vacant building report system, and that this building from the other night was not in that system and was not a vacant building. It was an occupied building. So why they made the determination, I don't know. I can't speak to that. And I go back to my 57th Avenue experience. That was a vacant house. It had been condemned by our building department, but we didn't know it. We didn't have a system to tell us that. And 911 reports reported people trapped. Another 911 report said it was vacant. So, yeah, you get to some of these and you got to make a decision. 57th Avenue's case, it wasn't boarded up. It had glass, it had doors, it was locked. It was, so there was a car in the driveway and toys in the front yard, all of that. It was some indication that there was people there, and then there wasn't. We injured 7 firefighters on that, two of them critically. So in the case of Baltimore, there's a culture there that needs repair. And we're not just talking about a culture of missing radios or straps like we were talking about in Boyd Street. We're talking about this whole decision matrix on, is it vacant or is it not vacant? So I'll go back to what I started with in the beginning on this, and thanking, in this case, Baltimore, for having the fortitude to do the after action report and release it publicly. And they did the same thing in this report that we did on 57th Avenue, is that we took the information, we took the report, and we compared the recommendations out of, in this case, the South Stricker Street fire to previous safety investigations. And if you go, I'm not sure the page number off the top of my head, but in there you'll see this matrix that compares the South Stricker Street recommendations, so recommendations of things to change, with recommendations out of other safety investigation reports. So you have the recommendations here, and then across the top you have the other fires, and it goes down the list, and it's again stunning and astounding to me. And we had the same scenario on 57th Avenue. The number of those other fires that all of these recommendations were made. You'll see X, 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 X. In 57th Avenue, we had known for 25 years what most of the problems were, but we failed to act. We created a culture within our organization that allowed those things to persist. And I'll submit to you that Baltimore's proof of that in their release, that they've created a culture. Now, it's not one person. It's not the chief. It's not the union. It's not the firehouse. It's a culture that has continued to accept the unacceptable. And, you know, we call it what do we call it? We call it the normalization of deviance.
That's our good friend.
Yeah, as everything starts to go down a road, if we feel comfortable with it, we just keep going down that road. It may be completely the wrong way, but you know what? We feel comfortable with it. That's the normalization of deviance, and that's what you see in both of those situations. So, you know, a lot to unwrap there in the Baltimore case. Certainly, same in Boyd Street, and a lot more to come out of both of those. But I think they were good examples of culture issues that we need to work on in the fire service. And, you know, it really begins to, I think, you know, we've done enough beating up there. It kind of gets to where I'm ready to talk about what I like to call the program I call Could You Rescue You? And, you know, how we help departments build personally and professionally to the point where they can answer affirmatively to that. And it's not about rescue out of a trapped Mayday environment or rescue out of a hole or whatever. It's a proverbial rescue as much as it's real. Could you pull yourself out of the situation? Could you pull your organization out of this situation? And, you know, how do you survive it? And I think probably a decent place somewhere in now for a break before we start talking about that.
Sure.
But,
yeah, definitely. And one thing I also want to make, in almost every podcast over the last 3 to 4 years of the 6 years we've already got under our belt, we play a PSA in every podcast, one of two, about wearing seatbelts when responding on apparatus. One is voiced over by Joey Logano of NASCAR. And the other one is from, I think it was from National Fallen Firefighters Foundation. And yet we know, and actually I had a post sent to me on social media that says, why do you make such a big deal about us wearing seatbelts on fire trucks? So I just wrote back. I said, thanks for your comment. If you don't know the answer to that question, then you might want to go to one of your officers or the chief of your department, because they shouldn't have to explain why, you know. And we see it, you know, just a couple of months ago, there was another accident. One of the firefighters was not wearing his belt, was thrown from the apparatus and lost his life, where it didn't have to happen. So those are very good points. And you're right. The magic word there is culture. And we have a choice. We have a choice about the culture that we want to participate in. And it doesn't mean you're a bad person because you want to enhance safety, or you want people to be, your brothers and sisters to be more comfortable and safer in it. It has nothing to do with that. It's about common sense. Common sense.
Yeah, it's really about doing what's right.
Exactly.
You know, and I hate to use the phrase that some of my traditionalist friends, you know, they scoff again at the "everyone goes home" mantra, but that really is what we want, isn't it?
Yeah,
don't we all want to go home? And you know, I twisted that, if you will. Twist is probably a bad word, but I twisted that when I was chief in our community risk reduction programs, and I said, well, I love everyone goes home. I want everyone in our community to be able to go home to a safe community. So it's not just about us going home. It's about our communities being able to go home. And if we don't, as an organization, embrace that mindset, that doesn't mean we And that's a perfect analogy for me because it doesn't mean we just sit back and go, oh, we're going to let it burn. No, we want our community to go home to safe environments. And how do we do that? We respond aggressively, never recklessly.
Right.
Make sure that we get there and we get the job done and we do what's right, not what's wrong. We don't just do the minimum because, if all you ever accept is the minimum, all you ever get is the minimum.
It's minimum.
So it really is a culture that has to be built that aggressiveness is good, recklessness is bad. And we have got to figure out how to get departments to merge those two things, those two groups of people that are out there. We either merge them into an aggressively competent force or we get rid of the recklessly incompetent part of what's there so that we can allow the aggressively competent people to move forward. Because this isn't, we are no disrespect to secretaries. We're not a bunch of secretaries sitting at the desk. This isn't a business where we can go, it's 3:00. I got to go. We are a 24/7 business that has to be ready at moment's notice. And we cannot allow a culture of recklessness or a culture of indifference to take over our environment. And that's the culture we got to change.
Exactly. All right, folks, if you are watching the video, you're not going to see anything different. If you're listening to the audio, well, you know what happens. We're going to take a little pause here. There'll be a few words for our sponsors and our public service announcements, and then we'll be back with our guest, Chief Marc Bashoor, right after these words. As always, please stay tuned. Hello and welcome back to this episode of 5-Alarm Task Force. We are here with my guest today, Retired Chief Marc Bashoor, who is the executive editor for the last few years of firerescue1.com. And again, as I mentioned in your first segment, if you haven't subscribed to their daily news blasts, you should, because it's another take on the information. And as we just talked about in that first segment, that we need to learn more about what's going on around us and in our communities, but also other communities. Fire Rescue One often has some of the stories that some of the other news blasts just don't cover, or they cover just minimally. And Fire Rescue One seems to provide a little bit more information. So I'm not telling you to change anything. I'm just saying add Fire Rescue One news blast to your email on a daily basis. And on the weekends, they have a great report on the weekends as well. So in the first segment, the chief addressed two major reports that have recently come out. The tragedy in Los Angeles, LAFD, and then the recent report that came out just actually publicly, I think, released yesterday in the Baltimore tragedy as well. But Chief, you have a little different segment that you kind of hinted at as we were closing segment one that you'd like to talk about one of the things that you really enjoy teaching.
Yeah, and so we talked in the beginning about Boyd Street and South Stricker Street, Boyd Street in Los Angeles and South Stricker Street in Baltimore. And I mentioned for Boyd Street, there was, the training that saved them. They almost died, but it was the training that saved them on Boyd Street. And South Stricker Street in Baltimore, same situation where we talked about culture of an organization that probably just looked at the incident and said, it was just another fire, right? And in the case of South Stricker Street, they ended up with 4 people trapped. In the case of Boyd Street, everybody was able to get out. Nobody was directly trapped. So their training got them out. In the case of South Stricker Street, where 4 people ended up trapped, it was their training that then kicked into high gear. And the people that came in and were able to breach the walls of Bravo and Delta exposures to be able to get to where these entrapped firefighters were. That took ingenuity, it took training, and they knew what needed to be done and they did it. But it took that bad event happening for it to kick in. The culture took over that was the aggressive culture took over, that allowed them to find those people. So how do we get there? And I have a program I call Could You Rescue You? And actually, website Could You Rescue? I'm sorry, the website is the letter U, rescueyou.com, where it's just, I'm not selling anything, it's just about bringing people together and bringing resources together so that both personally and organizationally, you have what it takes to succeed in these incidents. It's not that you're going to be able to draw on this at the moment that that incident happens. It's your development. It's your core development over time. And that will allow you to draw on, when your mind is physiologically mush because of what's going on around you, it's this development that will carry you through and allow you to succeed. So I call it the personal success tetrahedron. And the base of that tetrahedron is always service, because that's what we do. At the core of everything, service is our mission. So that's the base of that personal success tetrahedron. The three sides, and I'm going to cover all three of them. One is physical strength, and that's talking about both physicality and nutrition. So physical exercise and nutrition. Moral focus is the second side, and then the third side is mental toughness. Those three things are what make up who we are and what make up our ability to act and react when bad stuff happens. How we react, how we act and react depends on how we've meshed those three things together. Are we able to draw on our strengths of all three of those? So physical strength, moral focus, mental toughness. Are we able to draw on our strengths of all three of those to do the right thing at the moment it needs to happen? That depends on how you've developed yourself, both from a training perspective, from a physical exercise perspective. So I want to talk first about the physical strength, and I'll talk about myself. I was not a specimen of good physical health, if you will, as I was a young battalion chief and coming up into being an assistant chief. And I had gotten myself up to, and I'm 6 foot tall, but I got myself up to 247 pounds and was not in the gym. I would go to the gym with my crew, but I wasn't in there to build my body. I was just in there to exercise. So I wasn't in on a plan. I didn't have a nutrition plan. My nutrition plan was when I'm hungry, I eat. Well, that's not a real good plan. That satisfies the hunger, but that doesn't satisfy your nutritional needs. So as we look at the physical strength side of that tetrahedron, that's both, again, physical fitness and nutrition. There's a lot to wrap up into it. We're not going to cover it all in this segment, but on the physical strength, you've got to look at what it is that your body needs. And we look at things like functional fitness. If you go to firefighterfunctionalfitness.com or firerescuefitness.com, those are both friends of mine that and fire service leaders who have sites that help you talk about and deal with functional fitness. The things that we do every day, carrying a hose up a set of stairs, the sledgehammer on the tire, the pulling the tire with a rope, the functional things we do. Sometimes if all we're doing is bench press and curls with dumbbells, traditional weight stuff, we're not exercising the muscles the way that we use them. And if we're not exercising the muscles the way we use them, we're missing out on an opportunity to hone those muscles right. So functional fitness is important to this. From a nutrition perspective, the big thing I want to cover there is calories in, calories out. You can talk about macros and micros and everything else you want to talk about. And in the class, it's a 4-hour class, we talk about it briefly, macros and micros. You can talk about that all day long. At the end of the day, it's about calories in, calories out. And those calories come from all kinds of different things. So as you look at your exercise either has to be sufficient enough to help you burn that number of calories that you're taking in, no matter what they are, or you need to limit that calorie intake so that you don't have to do so much exercise, cardio exercise, to burn it off. But you got to make sure your body's getting the right amount of proteins and fats and carbohydrates to be able to function. And you're probably going to be higher on the proteins and lower on the carbohydrates. The old Atkins diet, which is the first diet I tried, essentially eliminates carbohydrates. I lost 80 pounds very quickly. When I went off of the Atkins diet and back to eating the way I used to, I gained every bit of it back and got myself back to 247 pounds. Then keto came out. I mean, it was South Beach diet. Then it was Atkins. And I mean, you name it. They've all been out there. At the end of the day, I had to teach myself that it was about calories in, calories out. And I had to trick my mind sometimes into understanding that, hey, stupid, you're full. Stop eating. So easier said than done. But one of the little tricks that I want to share with your listeners is trash on the plate. It sounds stupid, and yeah, I know a firefighter here or there that might still eat when there's trash on a plate. But generally speaking, when you get full and you're done, put some trash on the plate, because it's highly unlikely most people are going to eat off of a plate that's got trash on it. It's just a psychological trick for the mind. The other part of that, though, is, and it goes to the calories in, calories out. I'm not an alcohol drinker, so this is very easy for me to say. The alcohols with the grains and the barley and lots of carbohydrates, lots of sugars. I won't use the brand name. A Coke, that is a brand name. So, anyways, a can of Coke has the equivalent of 7 tablespoons of sugar. I used to have, on average, when I was up at that weight, I used to have 2 to 3 Cokes, 8-ounce can of Coke, a day. I would have them in a 32-ounce, this isn't 32, but I would have them in a 32-ounce cup from one of the restaurants that I almost named. And I did an experiment. When you put the regular amount of ice in that cup, an 8-ounce can fills up that 32-ounce cup. So I had 2 to 3 of those a day, and they had the equivalent of 7 tablespoons of sugar. So if I had a 3 soda a day, 21 tablespoons of sugar just in those sodas. That doesn't talk about all the other sugars I've been having. So when we talk about calories in, calories out, I'm talking about a whole lot of sugar not in. So natural sugars are good if it's natural in the fruits or in the foods you have, just not in excess. So I did away with all sugar drinks, and I lost 30 pounds pretty quickly. I also cut down the amount of food, got the trash on the plate, just went to a different way of eating, and lost 30 pounds pretty quick. Did some more research because I still wasn't where I wanted to be, and found that carbonation. So I had switched from sugared drinks to diet drinks, sodas. Okay. Well, come to find out, carbonation was another one of my problems, holding the fat and not allowing me to lose weight. I was only on the treadmill, so this is on the exercise side. I was only on the treadmill for 20 minutes. So again, doing my own research, I eliminated the carbonation, which was very difficult, and I added 5 minutes to my treadmill. 15 more pounds came off like that. It was a matter of minor adjustments. Now I had to replace my drinking with water, which, heaven forbid we drink water, right? And unsweet iced tea. And that's sacrilegious living in Florida, I know, and in the South. But unsweet iced tea. And for my electrolyte replacements, I take one of the zero sugar brands that's out there. And after every workout, I have one of those 8-ounce bottles of the electrolyte replacement. So that gives me a little fruity taste, but there's no sugar in it. I'll have a tea from that chain I almost mentioned, right?
Right.
I'll have an unsweet tea. But then I'll drink water the rest of the time. So that could be difficult for people, but I went back to where I'd lost 85 pounds and down from the 247. I learned through my own research what worked for me as far as an exercise program. I learned what worked for me as a nutrition program. I don't eat any later than 5 p.m. That's about metabolism. I go to the gym 5 a.m. in the morning, every morning. Saturday's my only day off. My metabolism's up and running because I'm in the gym. I'm working out. I've been doing all the things. So my metabolism is helping burn off whatever I eat. I eat a big lunch and then I eat almost nothing at dinner. Maybe most times it's just like a cup of red grapes. That's my wine for the day. Okay, it's my red grapes. That's all I have. I don't need any more. My body doesn't need any more. All of my health indicators are good. At the end of the day, it works for me. It might not work for you. It might not work for the next person. And I encourage people, number one, I'm not a nutritionist. I encourage people to go to a medical professional to find out what works for them. But not every plan or every exercise program is going to work the same for you as it does for me. And our bodies just react differently. So that's one side of the tetrahedron. The next side is moral focus. And, it kind of goes to a little bit of what we talked about in the beginning. It's not going to happen here. I could do a search right now online and pull up 15 things like this of things that firefighters have done that were morally unacceptable. Stealing from patients, stealing from stores, holding back retirement account money from firefighter pension plans. I mean, you name it. I could pull them up right now. I just did it for a class, so I know they're out there. And they're not things that happened 10 years ago. They're happening today. They're happening all over the country. And we are the ones that are bringing these people in or allowing it to continue. We've got to change that culture. So we've got to get that moral focus of what our performance is on the job. And that comes from a morality in your life. Doesn't mean you have to be Miss or Mr. Goody Two Shoes. Maybe that's what you're going to call it. But whether it is a theological background or just a social understanding that you need to do what's right for Grandma Jones. I talk about Grandma Jones and the 10 chairs, Grandma Jones being everybody that's out there in the community. The 10 chairs, the first 8 are the people who die in fires every 3 hours in the United States. So that's all day is the first 8. The 9th chair is the firefighter that dies in the line of duty once every 3 days. And the 10th chair is a firefighter who dies to suicide once every 3 days. Grandma Jones and the 10 chairs is who we should be making a difference for. And that morality that you bring to the job comes out of, again, how you've developed your personal life and the way that you look at things and go, okay, that's the right thing to do. And that's what makes it better for Grandma Jones and the 10 chairs is when we can come to work and do the right thing. I talk about a wall judge. If you don't know whether it's the right thing, whatever it is, I encourage you to pick a spot on the wall. And I've done this with several speakers who've had problems figuring out how to speak or how to say the right thing. Find a spot on the wall and speak to the spot. Okay, maybe it's a clock, maybe it's a crease in the wall, whatever it is. Find that spot. And when you're getting ready to do something or you're contemplating something, it's a sixth sense. Just look at your spot. Look at your wall judge. And if your wall judge looks at you and goes, "Are you freaking crazy?" then you're probably freaking crazy. And it's probably not the thing to do. But if the wall judge kind of shrugs his shoulders and goes, or gives you the nod, yep, that's the right thing to do, then it's probably the right thing to do. Or maybe you need to think about it.
It's funny you say that because you're talking that and over your shoulder, I'm seeing the face of my dad, may rest in peace, who taught us, the 3 boys, and I'm in the middle of the 3. He said, if you don't know if something's right or not, you go stand in the mirror. Yeah. Like you told me about that test. And I said, yeah, Dad, you asked me, did I try my best? And I said, I really did, Dad. He goes, can you look in the mirror? Because that guy in the mirror knows every single secret that you have.
Yeah.
And he always knows the truth versus a lie. So if you can look in the mirror and say, I studied and prepared for that, to do that paper the best I could. And he goes, you got a C+. And I'm like, all that doesn't mean you're a bad kid or a bad student, just means on that subject, you're a C+. But that's the person to talk to when you have that question.
Yep.
Did I do it right? And as you're saying it, I'm seeing over your left shoulder in the chair, I'm seeing my dad's face telling me the same thing. Look in the damn mirror.
That's funny. Yeah. And really that's what we're talking about is that whole moral focus. You know, my dad was a Baptist minister and he was a World War II Marine. So I had a different kind of
That was my dad. He was an Army guy for World War II in the
Yes,
Pacific. Yeah.
so those of us that have been through that environment understand it. And if you're not through that, then you got to find other ways to develop it. And whether it's like I said, whether it's a theologic background or not, it is a lot about what's right and what's wrong, and the morals you bring to the job, and then that translates into how you perform. So that's side two. So the first side was physical strength, which is strength and nutrition. The second side is moral focus. The third side and the final side of the tetrahedron is or we'll say the fourth side, because the base is the mission. The fourth side is mental toughness. We see a lot, we do a lot. Nobody should be expected to do this alone. And the PTSD and all the things that are that you hear about, they're real, that are out there. We need to help each other. We need to be there for each other. We need to build some toughness of our own. Because again, I go back to this is not a desk job. This is on the street, picking up dead bodies, or picking up arms or legs, having the kid look up at you. And this was a personal experience of mine. A kid look up at you. I was a battalion chief, and I showed up at this incident ahead of everybody else. And the kid had shut his hand in the door, and he looked up at me and looked just like my son. And I lost a little bit of composure at the moment that he looked up at me. But he said, "Am I going to be able to save my finger?" And I said, "Well, let me take a look." Well, they unwrapped his finger, and he was staring at me the whole time. He didn't look down at his finger, and then they unwrapped it, and his finger was hanging off by the skin. And literally, there wasn't anything that was going to happen that was going to save that finger. But I had to reassure him that the doctors would do everything they could, and that he needed to keep it sewed up, and that we were getting his mom and his dad. And we've got to have that mental capacity to deal with it. But then we've also got to be able to deal with it on the backside when we're done. If we need to discharge that, if you will, to purge that, we have a way to do that. So whether that is employee assistance programs within your organization, whether it is the new national hotline, 988. 988 is an important tool now that's out there. Anybody, anywhere, firefighter, EMT, police, regular person can dial 988, and that gets you to a trained clinician. If all you need to do is talk, you'll be able to talk. If you need some services, they'll be able to get you to some services. So that's a critical link. And as we talk about building this entire tetrahedron, we've got to be able to build all of those sides. And it's not, you think about an artist modeling clay. They don't just go, "Here you go." It is a art. And it's going to take you as an artist of yourself to build that tetrahedron into something that is manageable, and that something that not only makes sense for you, but gets you to where you're providing the best service for Grandma Jones and the 10 chairs. And if we can get there, then we'll be in a position where we can deliver the service that we need to deliver. And I won't be able to go and in 5 minutes find 15 different things that we've done wrong. Unfortunately, we don't get a lot of media coverage on the things we do right, and love to see that change. And when we get them, we highlight them, whether it's on firerescue1.com or just me personally, we highlight them. So getting that personal success tetrahedron instilled in people, and understanding that it's much more than just about taking a job or signing on as a volunteer. And it's not just a desk job. You're going to see some bad stuff. You're going to need to be at the top of your game, so that when Stricker St happens, your body can shift into gear right away. And it's not just adrenaline taking over. It's training, it's development, it's all of it's the mental focus, the mental toughness, and the moral focus that allows you to come in and zero in on the right thing to do and get it done. If you're in a chaotic state, which is what we deal with, right? Chaos is what we deal with. If you bring chaos to the chaos, then you've done disservice to Grandma Jones and the 10 chairs, which includes
Mrs. Smith. And
right.
Mrs. Smith.
Yeah. I leave Mrs. Smith, Mr. and Mrs. Smith to Chief Brunacini. I have never wanted to intrude on his Mr. and Mrs. Smith. So, there's room for more than the Smiths in the world. So I got the Jones. And at the end of the day, we have to be able to bring calm to the chaos. We can't
People look to us for that. When we arrive on a scene, especially on a bad scene, and people see us getting off our apparatus with our tools and wearing all our gear, you suddenly see in their eyes a sense of hope because we're there.
Yeah.
We're there. And we must deliver the goods when that's our opportunity.
Yeah, we have to, right. We have to do the best we can do.
Right.
We're not going to be able to fix everything. We've got to realize that, and that's part of the mental toughness. There are some things that are going to be lost, but we have to know that we've done everything to the best of our ability. We've brought our A game every day, and that we've done everything we can possibly do. Can you control everything in that environment? No, you can't. Politics, unless you're the elected official or the chief, you can't control that. And even then, you may just have to manipulate it. That's just a fact of life. So firefighters on the field out there cannot get wrapped up in the politics of the politics of the United States or politics of the environment. You've got to let your chiefs deal with that politics and navigate those things that, sometimes chiefs just need to do things. You may not understand it at the time, but ultimately people need to use that tetrahedron to develop themselves and get themselves to where they're not worrying about the politics. They're worrying about the physical strength, the moral focus, and the mental toughness to be able to do the right thing for the service, which is their mission.
Right.
I hope that helps people in at least thinking through what the right thing is and getting themselves in a physical exercise and nutrition program that makes sense. And I'll certainly be able to help anybody that needs it. If nothing else, just to have a conversation and talk about what worked for me, and hopefully that can work for someone else.
That's wonderful. And I'll tell you, the way you presented this personalized tetrahedron, I think it makes so much sense. And if those of you who are watching or listening, if you take that and break that tetrahedron down on a personal basis, on your basis, nobody else in your department, just for you, you're going to see how much sense it actually makes. And it's funny, I guess, because the chief and I are from the same generation. Both our dads served their country in World War II. And it was a little bit more stricter upbringing, I think, that we had than in our day than kids have today. But I think that you can learn. We can all learn to be a better person.
Sure.
Whether you're on duty or off duty makes no difference. You can just learn to be a better person.
You're always on duty.
You're exactly. You're always on duty. Sometimes it's for the fire service, and sometimes it's for yourself or your family. And that's what you have to remember. And again, we stress this on every podcast. If you're a firefighter, and I can't address other first responders, although I did work with EMS for half a year as a fill-in in North Carolina. But the fact is, if you're a firefighter, you must be continuously open to continue to learn. You always have to be ready to learn something new. You also have to be ready to teach and share what you've learned with others. So what you've learned today in today's podcast with Chief Bashoor, you can take that and you can share you should listen to this podcast or watch it, or you can, what I learned on this podcast I was listening to, that this, and this. Take that and share that, because some of you may not have seen it or heard it. They may never have heard the concept before of even what the chief just talked about, this personalized tetrahedron, about how to be the best firefighter you can be. But you have to be good with yourself first. You have to be satisfied with yourself so you can serve others. And let's be honest, most of us go into this, whether a career, volunteer, part pay, WUI, we go into it because we feel a calling. We want to serve the public interest in some way. And for us, this was the way we chose, to give something back to our communities. But you can't ever shut yourself off from that community, because there is no off switch. Whether you live in the community you work in, really, I don't think plays a major role. Your professional whether again, career or volunteer, you can still be a professional firefighter if you don't get a paycheck. But you still need to be at the best of your game every shift, every hour of that shift. Wherever you go, wherever the call is, you got to bring your A game. And hopefully,
there is no B team.
Exactly. And hopefully, what you've heard today helps you look for and aspire to be that A team person for your community and for the oath that you took, because we all take the same oath, no matter where we're located, no matter what country we're in. We always, whatever language we speak, we say, we take the oath to protect lives and property in the communities we serve. You got to live up to that oath, because when you don't, then you're going to have to answer that moral, that spot on the wall, that dot on the wall that you have to address. Chief, I can't thank you enough for taking time from a very busy schedule. When you said you're coming down to Hollywood, I said, oh, yes, I slept. No, he doesn't. He's on the West Coast. He's coming down to Hollywood, Florida to teach for the Hollywood Fire Department?
No, it's for the South Florida Chiefs.
Oh, good.
So it's a conference they do annually, and this will be a 4-hour session on the Could You Rescue You, which I want to real quick.
Sure.
The website that I've got, and again, it's not selling anything, it's just an opportunity to link resources, is yourescueyou.com. So that's YOU rescue, the letter U.com.
Okay.
rescueyou.com. I encourage people to go drop me an email from there, or if your organization would like to get this program, send me an email. We'll have the conversation, see how we can do that. It's I think it's about success building. We're about personal and organizational success and figuring out ways to help organizations and people succeed and survive.
Sounds great. And I'll put all that information in the show notes, especially also about the 2 reports. So we put that there. Our sincere thanks to Chief Marc Bashoor for joining us once again. Chief, we want to wish you and yours a very safe, healthy, and happy, enjoyable holiday season.
Thank you. Same to all of you and your listeners as well.
Thank you very much. Folks, if you're watching the video, this is going to be the conclusion. If you listen to the audio podcast, we're going to be right back right after these words. But for those leaving us, thank you very much. We'll be back next week with another podcast. Stay safe and stay well. And as the chief said, let's make sure everyone goes home. Take care, folks.